The Green Bay Packers, well, they have a problem. They have a dilemma they got themselves into. They were actually considered before the preseason, during training camp, during the preseason, the beginning of the season. Well, they were actually kind of a deep playoff contender, maybe leading to a Super Bowl, maybe. Especially with Micah Parsons' trade. Well, they were big time contenders to win the North and maybe make a Super Bowl run. Well, since that time, they have been very inconsistent. They are very inconsistent. It started off beating the Lions, and that was very, very impressive with Jared Goff and the double duo, Lightning and Thunder, Jameer Gibbs and David Montgomery. Well, they shut them down, and they won. And then they beat the Commanders. But then they lost to the Cleveland Browns and had a tie versus the Dallas Cowboys that they could have lost. And then they had a hard time beating the Bengals, and they had a hard time beating the Arizona Cardinals. But it looked like they had it all together when they beat the Pittsburgh Steelers. And then came the Panthers. And their offense has struggled at times this year, and the Carolina Panthers was one of them examples. And then the Philadelphia game. It was 0-0 in the half, and then they got themselves in a hole 10-0 and 10-7 and a dismal fourth down call of just running the football and then fumbled. And Jordan Love got 2 fumbles as well. Let's be honest, we all thought that the Cleveland Brown loss was just a coincidence. Maybe just a fluke loss because the Browns defense had a pretty good defense with Myles Garrett. They just missing an offense to be legit. Maybe better than they are, but no one can take the Browns serious. But then it started happening. They couldn't close out very well versus the Cardinals. They were in a dogfight with them. And then the Panthers and now the Eagles. And it looked like their whole down offensive line and their whole offense, basically, the wheels fell off. They blew up. With offensive line issues that anybody can go through, key wide receiver injuries, as like they keep going in and out every couple weeks. And then the big blow, Tucker Kraft. The guy that can be an X Factor. Well, he is an X Factor that can blow up the defense if you don't pay attention to Christian Watson or Romeo Doubs. He could go right in the middle and expose the defense. It looked like Jordan Love's causing turnovers and can't get going. And the 2 fumbles in the Eagles game. It's like the whole team is falling apart because at times the defense can't get it together with their inconsistencies even with Micah Parsons. The whole bus of the Packers just collapsed almost. The wheels are starting to fall off. And this point of the season is not the time to fall off because a lot of rivalries and divisional matchups are in the back half of the season. It's the wrong time of the year to have a backside during the season. Well, the second half of the season, their schedule looked like they had the Giants at the Giants, Minnesota Vikings at Detroit, Chicago at home, at Denver, at Chicago, Baltimore Ravens at home, and at the Minnesota Vikings. And let's just say this. With their troubles right now, they could miss the playoffs. But first thing first, the NFC North is a dogfight. Even the Vikings at 4-5 right now is still in contention. They're 2 games back. But the Packers were supposed to be 1 or 2 fighting for the NFC North with the Detroit Lions. Right now, they're in 3rd. With the Detroit Lions and the Bears in front of them, and the Vikings are not far behind. It's wide open still. And they can find themselves out of the playoffs if they don't watch it. And guys, if they don't beat Minnesota in week 12, they have a problem because in week 13, they at Detroit. And then the Chicago Bears in week 14. And guys, those are divisional matchups are crucial right now for the Packers. I'd say they got to beat the Vikings and sweep them. And beat at least the Chicago Bears once. If they get swept by the Bears or lose to Detroit and one of the Vikings, they could find themselves out of the playoffs. But for that to happen, they gotta at least beat the Broncos or the Ravens, and both teams are red hot right now. If the Packers do a 9-7-1 record, they're not gonna go to the playoffs. Somehow, it gotta be some losses by the Bears. But they can win some big games, like they can beat the Lions later in the year or in the Vikings later in the year. They can sweep the Vikings and beat one time the Packers. That'd be huge for the Packers not making the playoffs. The Packers got to beat the Vikings in a sweep. And they got to beat the Bears once. And if they beat the Lions, that's huge. If they do not, that's not as bad. But it depends on that Vikings and Bears matchups are crucial. And they got to beat either the Broncos or the Ravens. And watch out for the NFC West matchups that actually can cause a problem in the wild card. Because watch out for the Rams, 49ers, and Seahawks. Because those three haven't figured out who's the top dog in that NFC West. But at 10-6-1, you might not get them in the playoffs either. But it's safer than 9-7-1. But if they make 8-8-1 in their record, they're not going to the playoffs. I do not think the Packers will make the playoffs. Totally no chance if they pull an 8-8-1. But the offense, they got to get it together. The defense got to keep performing. They got to stop turning the ball over. And they got to find a way to really fill the gap of Tucker Kraft. But tell me in the comments down below who's going to win the NFC North and who's going to get the wild card spots in the NFC side of the playoffs. Let me know in the comments down below. But hey, it's the NFL. Anything can happen. And there's a lot of football left to be played. I'll see you in the next video.